My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old. I am writing this because I need somebody, anybody, to understand how completely, how methodically, how stupidly I tore my own life apart. People like to imagine disasters arrive with noise, a slammed door, a scream, a glass dropped hard enough against tile to explode. Mine arrived in silence. It arrived in the dim blue light of a phone screen at 2:03 in the morning, while the man I was supposed to marry slept beside me, with one hand resting near my hip, as if, even in sleep, he trusted I would still be there when he woke. The message was from a man named Daniel Lawson. Thinking about you. That was all. 4 words. Not a confession, not a plan, not even anything explicit enough to look dangerous to someone who didn't want to see danger. I should have deleted it. That is the truth I keep circling back to. The tiny hinge on which my entire life swung open and fell off its frame. I should have deleted it. Instead, I stared at the screen while my fiancé, Ethan Cole, slept peacefully next to me, his engagement ring catching the spill of moonlight from the half-open blinds. We had been together 8 years, engaged for 2. The wedding was 3 months away. That weekend, Ethan had spent hours with me at the kitchen table, surrounded by seating charts, linen samples, invitation proofs, and flower arrangements. He had looked so genuinely happy, so certain, his face lit with that steady warmth that used to make me believe I had done something extraordinary just by being loved by him. He had already started signing emails with my last name as a joke sometimes, testing how it looked. He had been planning our honeymoon to Ireland with the kind of earnest excitement that made even airport layovers sound romantic. He talked about old bookstores in Dublin, rain on Castle Stone, holding my hand on narrow streets like we were still 24 and reckless in the best way. And while he was dreaming beside me, I texted Daniel back. Can't sleep either. That was where it started. Not with some great sweeping passion. Not with thunder, not with destiny. Just 2 words typed in the dark by a woman who already had everything she claimed she wanted. Daniel had moved back to town 6 months earlier for a new job. We had reconnected at a mutual friend's birthday party. He looked older than the boy I'd known in college, of course, but in a way that only made him more dangerous to someone like me, more polished, more confident, wearing the memory of who he had been like a secret I thought only I understood. He had been the one I crushed on sophomore year, the one I never quite got over, even after life moved on and Ethan became the center of it. Back then, Daniel had felt like unfinished business, a version of youth that never got its proper ending. Now he was single, successful, available, and I was arrogant enough to think that meant something. The texting escalated fast, though not so fast that I couldn't lie to myself about it. Late-night conversations, inside jokes from college, shared memories sharpened by nostalgia. Questions that sounded harmless until they weren't. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd gone out back then? I remember staring at that question for a long time. I remember feeling a thrill that already should have scared me. Instead, I smiled. I told myself it was just curiosity, just catching up, just revisiting a version of myself I had outgrown. But emotional betrayal has a way of disguising itself as innocence, right until the moment it becomes impossible to defend. Then came lunch. Just as friends, we both said. Ethan knows I'm meeting you, I told him once. And the lie slid out of me so easily, it should have horrified me. But by then, I had already begun deleting messages, already begun turning my phone face down, already begun living in the split-screen logic of people who want 2 incompatible things and call that confusion instead of cowardice. Lunch became coffee. Coffee became long walks after work, where Daniel would brush his shoulder against mine and let the silence do the work for him. He knew exactly how to talk to me, how to make me feel seen, not as a future wife, not as part of a stable life already in motion, but as a woman standing at the edge of some unrealized version of herself. He asked me questions Ethan had stopped asking. Or maybe questions Ethan thought he already knew the answers to. Was I happy? Did I ever feel like I chose the safe life too early? Did I ever miss who I used to be? They were selfish questions, dangerous ones, and I answered all of them. I wish I could say Ethan changed first. I wish I could say I was lonely enough to explain myself. I wish I could point to some cruelty, some neglect, some unbearable emptiness inside our relationship and use it as a defense. But Ethan was kind. He was loyal. He was patient. He was the kind of man who remembered my mother's birthday and refilled my gas tank if he borrowed my car, and left notes in the fridge when he knew I had a hard day coming. That was the ugliest part of all this. I was not escaping some broken relationship. I was vandalizing a good one. 3 weeks before the wedding, Daniel and I were sitting across from each other in a little cafe with chipped ceramic mugs and a flickering neon sign in the window. Outside, people kept passing by like it was any other afternoon, like the world had no idea my life was balancing on a blade. Daniel looked at me for a long moment and said, quietly, "I think I'm falling for you." Even now, I know there was still time. I could have stood up. I could have gone home. I could have told Ethan everything before the lie turned into something even more unforgivable. I could have remembered why I chose him in the first place. His steadiness, his goodness, the way he believed in me with a kind of calm devotion that never demanded spectacle. Instead, I reached across the table and took Daniel's hand. "I think I am too," I said. I can still hear my own voice. Soft. Certain. Ruined. The physical affair started 2 days later. We met at Daniel's apartment while Ethan was at the engagement dinner his sister and closest friends had organized for him. One of those warm, cheerful evenings, full of laughter and champagne and speeches about how lucky he was, how beautiful our future looked, how in love we were. The irony is so sharp now, it makes me feel sick. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. Morning kisses with Ethan as he left for work. Stolen afternoons with Daniel behind closed curtains. Evenings spent discussing RSVPs, menu tastings, and final suit fittings while I scrubbed evidence from my phone and tried to act like I wasn't rotting from the inside out. Ethan would come home smiling, talking about details for the wedding, and I would nod in the right places while my heart pounded with the adrenaline of deception. I told myself I was confused. Cold feet. Pre-wedding panic. A temporary spiral. I told myself I would figure it out after the honeymoon. I told myself Ethan would never have to know. I told myself lies in such quick succession that they began to sound like common sense. Then Ethan found the receipts. Not metaphorical receipts, actual ones. The restaurant where Daniel and I had our first real date. The hotel where we spent a Tuesday afternoon. The jewelry store where I bought Daniel a watch because he once mentioned admiring it in a window. I had stuffed them into my coat pocket like an idiot, like some amateur criminal who thought hiding was the same thing as being careful. Ethan found them while looking for gum. That is another detail that haunts me. The smallness of the moment. The innocence of it. He was getting ready for dinner with his parents to finalize wedding details. He was standing in the hallway in a pressed shirt I had helped him choose, one hand in my coat pocket, distracted, ordinary, trusting. Then I watched his face change. First, confusion. Then, recognition. Then, something worse than anger. Devastation so total it seemed to hollow him out from the inside. He looked down at the jewelry store receipt for a long second before raising his eyes to me. "Who is Daniel?" he whispered. I could have lied. I could have said, coworker, cousin, gift for someone else. I could have reached for one more pathetic explanation and maybe bought myself another hour, another day, another stretch of poisoned time. But something in his face stopped me. It was the way he was looking at me. Not like a man asking a question, but like a man giving the woman he loved one final chance not to destroy him completely. "He's someone I've been seeing," I said. Ethan stared at me for what felt like forever. though it could not have been more than 30 seconds. Then he laughed. Our wedding is in 17 days, he said quietly. 17 days, Claire. And you've been seeing someone else? He did not yell. That made it worse. He did not throw anything, did not call me names, did not collapse into the kind of fury I almost wished for, because at least fury would have made me feel less monstrous. Instead, he just stood there holding those receipts while tears streamed down his face. And somehow, that was unbearable. Ethan, I can explain. Don't. His voice changed on that word. It lost warmth, lost softness, became something cold enough to make the room feel smaller. Don't you dare explain this away. Then he walked toward our bedroom. Our bedroom, the one we had shared for 3 years, the one where we had talked about babies and mortgages and growing old in sarcastic comfort. The one where he had once fallen asleep with wedding venues open on his laptop and his head in my lap. I heard drawers opening, the suitcase zipper, the brutal, practical sounds of a person accepting reality faster than I deserved. By the time I found the courage to follow him, he was packing. Ethan, please, I said. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. You're the one I want to marry. He turned around then, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not only hurt, not only anger.
Disgust. Clear. Total. Final.
If I meant anything to you, he said, this never would have happened. He was right. That was the worst part. Not just that he said it, but that the truth of it landed so cleanly there was nowhere for me to hide from it. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching the man I loved fold shirts with hands that were only shaking a little. And I realized there are some moments in life when language becomes useless. No apology can reach that far. No explanation survives contact with what you have done. Ethan, I said again, quieter this time, like lowering my voice might somehow make me less guilty. Please don't leave like this. He zipped the suitcase and looked at me as if he didn't recognize me anymore. How else would I leave? He asked. I had no answer. An hour later, his sister came to pick him up. Megan had always been warm with me, the kind of woman who hugged hard, laughed loudly, and made me feel like family before I had officially become it. She had helped plan the wedding shower, she had texted me pictures of ties and boutonnieres and little details Ethan would pretend not to care about but secretly loved. When she arrived that night, she did not come inside at first. Ethan carried his suitcase out, and I followed behind him like someone trailing the outline of a life that was already gone. Megan looked from him to me and then back again. Something in Ethan's face told her enough. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Her mouth tightened, and whatever affection she had ever held for me disappeared so quickly it almost felt physical, like a door slamming shut in the air between us. Get in the car, she told him softly. He did. I stood on the sidewalk in bare feet, calling his name once, then again, as if repetition might make him turn around. He didn't. He sat in the passenger seat staring straight ahead while Megan backed out of the driveway and drove away with the man I was supposed to marry. That night, I stayed in the apartment alone. There were wedding planning books on the coffee table, unopened gifts stacked near the wall, place cards in a neat little box, a half-finished spreadsheet on my laptop listing which relatives needed vegetarian meals. Everywhere I looked, there was evidence of a future that had existed that morning and was dead by midnight. I called Daniel. I don't know what I expected. Comfort, maybe. Certainty? Some grand moment where the person I had blown up my life for would say, now we can finally be together. Instead, after I told him Ethan knew, there was a long silence. Not thoughtful, not emotional.
Uncomfortable.
So, he said finally, what happens now? The question was so small, so flat, that for a second I couldn't breathe. I was surrounded by the wreckage of my relationship, my wedding, my home, and the man at the center of the other half of this disaster sounded inconvenienced. I don't know, I said. Another pause. Then carefully, Do you want to be with me? That should have been the moment I answered yes, if any part of what I'd told myself had been real. If Daniel had truly been my future, if what we had was worth what I had done, then that was the opening, the choice, the line in the road. But sitting there in that apartment, with Ethan's toothbrush still beside mine and the silence of his absence pressing against every wall, I understood something awful. I didn't know. Not because I was torn between two loves, because whatever I had been chasing with Daniel had never survived daylight. It fed on secrecy, on nostalgia, on imagination. It had thrived in the spaces where real life wasn't looking too closely. And now that real life had arrived, with consequences and grief and humiliation, I could suddenly see how flimsy it all was. I don't know, I said again. Daniel exhaled, and the sound carried disappointment more than heartbreak. Claire, I can't think right now. Okay, he said, but his voice had cooled. Call me when you do. He hung up. Within 24 hours, Ethan had called off the wedding. Or rather, his family did. His father handled the vendors with brisk, humiliating efficiency. His mother returned gifts. Megan posted something brief and polite on social media. Due to unforeseen circumstances, Ethan and Claire's wedding had been canceled. No scandal, no details, no public blood. Just a clean, elegant dismantling of everything we had built. The silence was somehow worse than gossip would have been. It gave my imagination too much room. I pictured people reading the post and immediately knowing, or suspecting, or texting each other privately. I pictured pitying looks from coworkers, from neighbors, from people who had bought us monogrammed towels and smilingly asked about honeymoon plans. Ethan blocked my number first, then my email, then every social media account I had. I called from an unknown number once, and he didn't answer. I drove to Megan's house because I knew he was staying there. I sat outside with my hands clenched around the steering wheel, watching the porch light glow, rehearsing apologies that all sounded pathetic before I even spoke them. I knocked anyway. No one answered. But I could see movement behind the curtains. That was the answer. I quit my job 2 weeks later. Officially, I said I needed time for personal reasons. Unofficially, I could not survive the looks. A few coworkers had been invited to the wedding. One woman in accounting had helped organize the office gift. My manager kept speaking to me in a careful tone that suggested he knew enough to be uncomfortable, but not enough to name it. I could feel people not asking questions. That became its own kind of torture. I moved out of the apartment because every room had Ethan in it. The kitchen where he danced badly while making pasta. The couch where he fell asleep during documentaries he insisted he was still watching. The bathroom mirror where he used to leave me sticky notes before early meetings. I couldn't open a cabinet without finding some ordinary object made unbearable by memory. So I packed what was mine, left behind what was too tangled to divide cleanly, and moved into a studio apartment across town, with thin walls, one small window, and the smell of stale takeout permanently trapped in the hallway. It felt exactly like what I deserved. I started therapy because I began having panic attacks, real ones. The kind where your body decides, without permission, that you are dying. My chest would seize, my hands would go numb. Once, I ended up crouched on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m, trying to remember how breathing worked. The therapist said shock and shame could do that. She said grief and self-loathing were not the same as accountability, though at the time, I didn't really understand the difference. 3 months later, I ran into Ethan at a grocery store. I was in the frozen foods aisle, staring at a box of something I had no intention of buying, when I looked up and saw him at the end of the row. For one stupid second, my whole body reacted before my mind did.
Recognition. Relief. Hope.
Then reality followed. He looked different, not ruined the way I had secretly feared and selfishly expected. Sadder, maybe. Leaner. More contained. But stronger, too. Like he had been forced through fire, and had somehow come out of it with fewer illusions and better posture. He saw me. His face didn't collapse. He didn't glare. He didn't look like a man aching to hear from me. He looked like someone seeing a place he used to live and no longer missed. "Hi," I said. It came out thin and embarrassed. He nodded once. That was all. Then he kept walking. I stood there, holding a bag of frozen blueberries like an idiot, staring after him until he disappeared around the corner. That was 6 months ago. I have tried in the time since to rebuild in the shallow ways people talk about after catastrophe. I got another job. I made rent on time. I went to therapy every week. I cut down on drinking. I even tried dating once or twice, though both times ended before dessert because I couldn't stop comparing strangers to the man whose trust I had shattered. I kept telling myself that eventually enough time would pass for the story to feel less raw, that maybe what Ethan and I had wasn't as rare as it seemed in memory, that maybe I had romanticized him because guilt made a martyr out of the person I hurt, that maybe what I lost was simply one possible future, not the future. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and there was nothing left to distract me from myself, I knew the truth. Ethan had been my person. Not in the childish sense, not because we were perfect, not because love meant ease, because he was the one who would have stood beside me through anything. He would have stayed through layoffs, through illness, through miscarriages, through aging parents and money stress, and all the dull, hard weather that makes up a real life. He would have been the kind of father our children deserved. Patient, present, funny at the exact moments fear needed softening. He would have loved our family with the same steadiness he had always loved me, and I had thrown all of that away for something I did not even truly want. For excitement, for ego, for the thrill of being desired by someone new, and the vanity of imagining that meant I was missing out on some greater life. Daniel stopped returning my calls 3 weeks after Ethan left. At first, he answered only with short messages. "Busy today, long week. Can we talk later?" Then later never came. When I finally reached him, his voice was distracted, already halfway elsewhere. "This is too messy," he said. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone so tightly my hand hurt. "Messy?" I repeated. "I blew up my life." "I know," he said, and there was something almost defensive in his tone, as if my disaster was accusing him simply by existing. "I didn't sign up for all this drama, Claire." I laughed then. A horrible little sound. "You didn't sign up for it?" I said. "You were in it." There was a pause. Then, "I never asked you to leave him." The sentence hit me with a force I can still feel in my ribs. Because technically, he was right. He had not forced me. He had not held a knife to the throat of my future and made me choose. Every selfish decision had belonged to me. Every lie had come from my mouth. Every betrayal had passed through my hands. But hearing him reduce everything to that, to his own clean exit from the guilt of it, made me finally see him clearly. He was already moving on. A month later, I saw pictures online before I had the sense to stop looking. He was with someone from his office. They were at a rooftop bar, smiling into the camera with that bright, uncomplicated ease reserved for people who have not detonated their lives for each other. They looked light, casual, untouched. I stared at that photo until I felt physically sick. Not because I loved him, because I had destroyed something sacred for something disposable. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong. Rock bottom arrived 6 months after Ethan left, and it sounded like my mother saying my full name. "Claire Elizabeth Bennett, we need to talk." My mother never used all 3 names unless someone had died or I had done something terrible. Since no one had died, I knew exactly which one it was. She was standing outside my studio apartment with the same expression she used to wear when I was 12, and she caught me stealing money from her purse. Disappointed, unsurprised, and somehow older than she had looked the week before. "Can I come in?" she asked. My apartment was a wreck. Pizza boxes on the counter, laundry in uneven piles, Empty wine bottles lined beside the sink like evidence submitted at trial. It looked like a place where a person had stopped believing she was worth cleaning up after. Mom stepped inside, took one look around, and didn't comment. That was worse than judgment would have been. "Sit down," she said. And I knew, before she even spoke again, that whatever was coming next would hurt in a way I was not ready for. Not explain this. There is no version of this story where what you did is acceptable. I swallowed hard, my hands twisting together in my lap. She told me everything, Mom continued. About Daniel, about the receipts, about Ethan finding out 17 days before the wedding. Each detail sounded uglier out loud, smaller, more pathetic. "I told everyone we grew apart," I said weakly. "That it was mutual. I didn't want—" "You didn't want to look like the villain," she finished. I flinched. "She is devastated, Claire," Mom said, quieter now, but no less severe. "Not just for Ethan, for all of them. Patricia said he won't even let her say your name anymore. He won't talk about the wedding. He won't talk about you. He just shuts down." I pictured Ethan like that, silent, closed off, and felt something inside me twist in a way that wasn't just pain. It was recognition. I had done that. "He loved you," Mom went on. "We all did. His whole family welcomed you like you were already theirs. You were already part of that family, Claire. And you threw it away." "I know," I whispered, but the words sounded hollow, like something rehearsed. Mom's eyes hardened. "Do you?" Silence filled the room. "For what?" she pressed. "For some fling?" "It wasn't just a fling," I said automatically. The defense rose out of me before I could stop it, like some reflex I hadn't unlearned yet. Mom let out a short, bitter laugh. "Where is he now?" That shut me up. Daniel had disappeared 3 weeks after Ethan left. Stopped answering. Stopped caring. Moved on. "Gone," I admitted. "Of course he is," she said. "Men like that don't stay when things get difficult. They chase excitement. They don't build lives." Her words weren't entirely fair, but they weren't entirely wrong either. "And Ethan?" she continued, her voice cracking just slightly. "Ethan would have stayed through anything. Job loss, illness, whatever life threw at you. You knew that, didn't you?" I did. That was what made everything worse. "Your father can't even tell people what happened," she said. "His friends ask about the wedding, about Ethan, and he makes excuses. He's ashamed, Claire." That hit harder than I expected. My dad had always been proud of me. Quietly, steadily proud in that way that didn't need constant praise, but was always there in the background. Now he couldn't even talk about me without lying. "And your sister?" Mom continued. "Kate adored Ethan. She was going to be in the wedding. She keeps asking if he's okay, if there's anything we can do to fix this. She doesn't understand how you could do something like this." Neither did I. That was the most unsettling part. I understood the steps I took, but not the version of me who had taken them. "You had everything," Mom said. "A man who loved you, a family who welcomed you, a future that was stable and good. And you traded it for a few weeks of excitement with someone who didn't even stay." I looked down at my hands. They didn't look like the hands of someone capable of that kind of destruction, but they were. "The worst part," she said, her voice dropping lower, quieter, more dangerous, "is that you're not even sorry for the right reasons." I looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "You're sorry you got caught," she said. "Sorry Ethan left. Sorry your life is difficult now. But are you sorry for what you did to him?" The question landed like a weight on my chest. Are you sorry for breaking his trust?" she continued. "For humiliating him? For making him question his own judgment, his own worth?" Each sentence stripped something away, layer by layer. "I am sorry," I said, but it sounded smaller now, less certain. "Are you?" she pressed. Or are you just sorry you lost him? That was when it hit. Not gently, not gradually, all at once. Like stepping off something solid and realizing there's nothing beneath you. I had been grieving my loss, my loneliness, my shame, my ruined future, but I hadn't truly sat with his pain. Not really. Not in a way that centered him instead of me. I thought about Ethan canceling the wedding, calling vendors, facing his parents, answering questions, explaining to friends why the life he had been building was suddenly gone. I thought about him lying awake at night, replaying every moment, wondering where he had missed the signs, wondering why he hadn't been enough. I felt sick. He's in counseling, Mom said. I froze. What? His mother told me, she said. He's seeing a therapist. He doesn't trust his own judgment anymore. He thinks there must have been signs he ignored, things he should have seen. The words hit harder than anything else she had said, because Ethan had always been so certain, so steady, so grounded in his understanding of people, and I had taken that from him. He's not dating, Mom added. He won't even consider it. Says he can't tell the difference between a good woman and someone who will lie to him. I closed my eyes. Every sentence felt like something being carved into me.
Permanent.
I want you to listen to me very carefully, Mom said, leaning forward. You are not to contact him. I just want to apologize. No. The word was final. Not loud. Not emotional. Just immovable. You don't get to do that, she said. You don't get to reach out and make yourself feel better. You've done enough damage. I stared at her. But the kindest thing you can do for Ethan now, she said, is to leave him alone. Let him heal without having to hear your voice. The room went quiet. Outside, I could hear people walking past, cars passing, normal life continuing, as if mine hadn't been reduced to this small, suffocating space. After a long moment, Mom spoke again. I keep thinking about your grandmother, she said softly. Grandma Rose. She had died 2 years earlier. She loved Ethan. Used to ask about him constantly, like he was already part of the family. She used to say, "Character is what you do when no one is watching," Mom continued. When it's just you and your choices. I remembered that. I remembered hearing it as a child and nodding like it was obvious. Like I would never be the kind of person who failed that test. She would be so disappointed in you, Mom said. That was what broke me. Not the anger, not the judgment, the disappointment. I started crying then. Not the frustrated, angry crying I had done before. Not the self-pitying kind that centered my own pain. This was different.
Deeper.
Ugly, in a way that felt honest. I cried for Ethan, for what I had taken from him, for the version of myself I had believed I was, and the one I had proven myself to be instead. Mom didn't comfort me. She didn't move. She just sat there and let me cry. The way you let a child cry when they've done something that cannot be undone. When I finally quieted, she stood up. I love you, she said. You're my daughter. That won't change. There was a pause. But I don't like who you are right now. The words landed clean. And until you figure out how to become someone better, I think we need some distance. She walked to the door, then stopped. Patricia asked me to give you something. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. My name was written on it, in Ethan's handwriting.
Neat. Careful. Familiar.
He wrote this, she said. But he couldn't bring himself to send it. She handed it to me. Then she left. I sat there for a long time, staring at that envelope. I had seen his handwriting everywhere. On birthday cards, on grocery lists, on little notes he used to leave on the bathroom mirror. Seeing it now felt like looking at something from another life. When I finally opened it, there was only one line inside. I hope he was worth it. That was it. No anger, no accusation, just quiet devastation. I read it over and over again until the words blurred, because the worst part was that it wasn't written to hurt me. It was written because he genuinely needed to know. And the answer was so clear, it made me hate myself. No, he wasn't. Nothing was. But by the time I understood that, it didn't matter anymore. A year and a half later, I found out Ethan was engaged. Not from him, not from friends because we didn't have any left in common. I found out from a notification on my phone while I was eating lunch alone at my desk. Ethan Cole is now engaged to Olivia Chen. One sentence. One quiet, ordinary sentence that somehow managed to knock the air out of my lungs. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then went dark, then lit up again when I tapped it like I hadn't read it correctly the first time. Engaged. Someone else was going to marry him. Someone else was planning a wedding with him. Picking out flowers, tasting cakes, arguing over playlists and seating charts. Someone else would stand across from him at the altar and see that look on his face. The one he used to give me. I felt something sharp twist in my chest, and then, almost immediately, I hated myself for feeling it. What right did I have? I had forfeited that the moment I chose Daniel. But knowing that didn't stop the ache. It didn't stop the images from forming anyway. Ethan laughing with her, holding her hand, building something new in the same steady way he had once built something with me. I couldn't stop myself from looking. I clicked into her profile. Olivia Chen, a software engineer. Her picture was simple, no dramatic poses, just her standing in soft light, smiling slightly, her expression open in a way that made her look safe, kind, the kind of woman who wouldn't make him question anything, the kind of woman who wouldn't break him, everything I should have been. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, moving through meetings and emails like someone half asleep, my mind looping back to that one sentence over and over again. Engaged. When I got home, I did something I had promised myself I would never do. I got in my car and drove to his parents' neighborhood. I didn't know where Ethan lived now. I had heard, vaguely, that he had moved out of his sister's place months ago, got his own apartment, started fresh. But I still knew where his parents lived. And something in me, something small and desperate and deeply unfair, needed to see something that still connected to the life I had destroyed. Their house looked the same. Patricia's garden was in bloom, just like it always had been in the spring. Rows of roses she had spent years cultivating. Ethan used to help her sometimes, kneeling in the dirt, complaining half-heartedly while secretly enjoying it. I sat in my car across the street, gripping the steering wheel, feeling like a stranger in a place that used to feel like home. Then the front door opened. Patricia stepped outside. She saw me immediately. There was no hesitation in her expression, no confusion, just recognition, and something tired behind it. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward my car. I rolled down the window, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs. "Mrs. Cole," I said. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here." "No," she said gently. "You shouldn't." Her voice wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. "But since you are," she continued, "we might as well talk." Before I could respond, she opened the passenger door and got in. The movement was so familiar, it made something in my chest tighten. There had been so many times she had sat in the front seat beside me or Ethan. Family dinners, holidays, long drives where she talked and laughed and filled the space with warmth. Now the silence between us felt heavier. "You heard about the engagement," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I admitted. "He's a good man," she said quietly. "Olivia makes him laugh again." Again. That word hit me harder than anything else, like laughter had been something I had taken from him. "I'm glad he's happy," I said. And I meant it, even though it hurt in a way that felt almost physical. Patricia studied my face for a moment. You look terrible, Claire. I let out a weak breath. I feel worse. That wasn't an exaggeration. The last year and a half had worn me down slowly, piece by piece. I had lost weight without trying. Sleep had become something unreliable, broken into fragments. Therapy helped, but it didn't erase anything. It just forced me to look at it more clearly. I'm not here to punish you, Patricia said. Life has already done that. I nodded. We sat in silence for a moment, both looking out at the garden. She almost didn't say yes, Patricia said suddenly. My head snapped toward her. What? When Ethan proposed, she said. She hesitated. My heart stuttered. Why? Patricia didn't answer right away. She watched a breeze move through the roses before speaking again. Because of you. The words landed softly, but they cut deep. She panicked, Patricia continued. She told me later that when he got down on one knee, her first thought wasn't happiness. It was fear. I swallowed hard. Fear. I had turned something that should have been pure into something uncertain. She started thinking about trust, Patricia said. About whether she could really believe in someone again. Whether she was setting herself up to be hurt the same way. I closed my eyes briefly. Every sentence felt like a quiet indictment. But Olivia is different, Patricia added. She's patient. She's consistent. She doesn't just say she loves him, she shows it, every day, in small ways. In the ways that matter. In the ways I had failed. How is he? I asked quietly. Better, she said. Much better. There was a pause. But he's not the same. I looked at her. What do you mean? He's more careful now, she said. More guarded. It took him a long time to trust her. Longer than it should have. The guilt settled deeper. He asks more questions, she continued. Needs reassurance. Checks things he never used to check. I felt something twist inside me. Because that wasn't who Ethan had been. He had trusted easily, freely, without suspicion. I broke that, I said under my breath. Patricia didn't contradict me. He's happy, she said instead. And that's what matters. Olivia makes him happy. They're talking about a future, a house, children. Children. The word lingered. Ethan had always wanted kids. We had talked about it, names, schools, what kind of parents we would be. Now someone else would stand beside him in that future, and they deserved it. They're getting married in 6 months, Patricia said. October. I let out a small, humorless breath. He always liked fall weddings, I said. He did, she agreed. We sat quietly again. Then she turned to me. I need you to promise me something. I already knew what it would be. Okay, I said. Don't contact him, she said. Not to congratulate him, not to apologize, not for anything. I nodded immediately. I won't. I mean it, Claire, she said. He's finally healing, finally happy. Don't reopen that. I won't, I repeated. I promise. She studied me for a moment, then reached over and squeezed my hand. It was the first kind gesture I had received from anyone connected to Ethan since everything had fallen apart. I did love you, she said softly. We all did. My throat tightened. You were good once, she continued. I choose to remember that version of you. Then she got out of the car and walked back to the house without looking back. That night, I sat at my kitchen table for hours. Then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I wrote Ethan a letter. Not to send, I had promised, but I needed to say it somewhere. Dear Ethan, I know I have no right to write this, and I won't send it, but I need to say these things anyway. I'm sorry. Not the shallow kind I felt when everything first fell apart. Not the kind that came from losing you and feeling alone. I mean the kind that comes from finally understanding what I did to you. I'm sorry for betraying your trust. I'm sorry for making you question yourself. I'm sorry for taking something pure and turning it into something that hurt you. I heard you're engaged. She seems like a good woman. I hope she loves you the way you deserve to be loved. I hope your wedding is everything ours should have been. I hope you have children who inherit your kindness. I hope you find peace in a way that has nothing to do with me. Losing you taught me what love actually is. It isn't excitement. It isn't novelty. It's choosing someone. Every day, even when it's hard. I didn't choose you, and that will always be the greatest failure of my life. Be happy, Ethan. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. 6 months later, on what would have been his wedding day, I drove to the beach where he had proposed to me. The sky was gray, the ocean restless. I sat in the sand for a long time, imagining him somewhere else, standing at an altar, watching Olivia walk toward him, his face soft with the kind of love I had once taken for granted. I hoped she looked radiant. I hoped he smiled. I hoped their families cried happy tears. I hoped it was everything ours never got to be. When the sun started to set, I reached into my pocket. The ring. The one he had given me years ago. A simple promise ring from early in our relationship, engraved with words I used to believe in. Always and forever. I turned it over in my fingers one last time. Then I threw it into the ocean, watched it disappear beneath the waves. Some promises, once broken, don't get repaired. They just end. I'm 32 years old, and I know now that Ethan was the love of my life. Some people get second chances, new beginnings, redemption. But some mistakes are too complete, too final. I had everything, and I traded it for nothing. Now I live with that, every day. If you're reading this and standing at that moment, that message, that choice, that quiet temptation you think you can control, don't. Because some mistakes don't just cost you a relationship. They cost you the person you were supposed to be.